We are also seeing now efforts to rename military bases across the country. The Senate Armed Service Committee voted on that. This week we've seen leading voices like General David Petraeus saying it's time to stop having military bases named after Confederate generals like Braxton Bragg. Is it time?
I do, actually. I think the right way to be able to do this is to be able to have the study, to be able to look at where the name come from, what do we need to have to be able to take a serious look at it, and then to be able to transition. There are lots of great leaders, military leaders that are around the country that are modern leaders that we can continue to be able to honor.
That is, of course, Oklahoma Senator James Lankford. That loser decided that you could just negotiate with communists. Just give them a little and then they'll be fine. That's exactly the type of person we need to remove from office, which is why I'm excited to introduce my next guest, Nathan Dahm. He's a state senator already in Oklahoma. He actually has a pair, and we need him to get rid of James Lankford. He's challenging him in a primary. Nathan, how did a great state like Oklahoma, a very red state, elect such a loser in the first place?
Well, first of all, Jesse, it's great to be on with you. But as often happens with politics, name ID is a lot of the battle. As you know as well as I do, that not of the electorate is very well informed. Before Senator Lankford ran for Congress, he ran youth camp here in Oklahoma, the largest Christian youth camp in America. So many of those young people were first eligible to vote when he first ran. And so they knew the name, didn't know anything about his policies, didn't know where he stood on it, because he basically ran as, hey, I'm the guy that will sit in the circle and sing Kumbaya, holding hands with the left. I'm willing to talk about those needed compromises as if we need to ever compromise with these communists. But it was just a matter of people not being aware of his actual policy stances, because he really didn't have a whole lot of them. He was just running on, hey, I'm a nice guy. I will be a part of the club up there, but I'll represent Oklahoma as a part of the club. And so I agree with you. There's so many rhinos up there that we need to replace, and that's why I'm in this race.
Nathan, can you tell me, are you finding people more involved and interested in the primary now? Because I've been screaming it at people. Everyone's excited about the midterms. I get it. I'm excited too. Let's get some power back from these people. But the midterms don't matter if we elect a bunch of losers like James Lankford again. We need people around there to get involved in primaries. Are they more involved now in the primary process?
Absolutely. A lot of people have had buyer's remorse with Senator Lankford. They realize now, the scales have finally fallen off. They finally looked at his voting record, looked at things that he's been advocating for. But the thing that I keep telling people is, I use the Phil Schlafly quote, that the Democrats are driving us off the fiscal cliff at 75 miles an hour, and the Republicans are doing it at 55 miles an hour. We can't keep electing these same people. I mean, look at right now, it's, Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin that are holding the Democrats accountable and holding up them from driving us off the fiscal cliff. What happens if in November, yes, we take back the House and the Senate with the same old rhinos that are going to just ease off the gas a little bit, but continue to drive us off that fiscal cliff? No, we need strong, true conservatives that will actually have the fortitude to stand up and say no. I've done that in the state legislature when the Oklahoma Republican legislature, which has 75% supermajority control. We have over 75% of the House and the Senate. We had a revenue shortfall, and what was the Republican leadership's solution? Well, we need to raise taxes. So they advocated for $500 million in new taxes. I voted no every single time. Of course, they warned me if I continued to vote no, they would remove my chairmanship. They would push me out of the leadership position I'd been elected to. They would do all those things. And I told them, I'm not up here to have a title of chairman. I'm up here to stand up for my people. So I voted no on every tax increase. And yes, eventually they took me away from that chairmanship, but that hasn't stopped me. If anything, that's made me more vocal about how we need to stop these rhinos at every level of government and elect true conservative fighters, people who will actually stand up and fight for us and fight for the Constitution.
Speaking of fighting, let's talk about a bill you have involving Oklahoma sheriffs and the feds. What is this thing?
So I actually have 3 different bills dealing with empowering the sheriffs. Sheriffs are constitutionally the most powerful law enforcement entities and individuals in the country because they are directly elected by their people. And so the bills that I've introduced, one of them would say that the feds cannot operate in a county in Oklahoma without the sheriff's permission. One would say that the sheriff could arrest feds if they try to confiscate firearms in their county. And another one would say that the sheriffs can recreate the posse system to call upon people from their county, from the neighboring counties, in cases of disaster, riot, if BLM or Antifa or any of these other communists try to come into the state, or if the feds try to come in and violate people's individual rights, the sheriff can call up the posse. And so we shouldn't have these unelected bureaucrats, even in law enforcement, federal agents, 1,000 miles away, coming into Oklahoma and dictating how we, the people in Oklahoma, live our lives, or having them violating our constitutional rights. So the sheriffs have this inherent right, but these bills would put it in Oklahoma law so they have that additional protection of state law to be able to back them up.
Nathan, there are people out there, obviously from all over the country right now, and they want their Republican state legislatures to do something to protect them from more of this COVID insanity out there. Is there something practical somebody who's watching right now can pick up and call their state senator or state rep and say, hey, you need to push for a bill like this? What should they be telling them?
Well, I think overall, one of the bills that I introduced this year that I'm most excited about is a bill that would prohibit all social credit scores, because that's essentially what this whole COVID nonsense is about. It's about moving us towards a communist Chinese-style social credit system to where they can actually protect, or to where they can control the lives of the people. And this is just the first step towards it. So we need to be going on the offensive, trying to prohibit their long-term goal in this great reset that they're pushing. So that's the number one thing. But some of the other bills that I've done, I introduced a bill that would make ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine available over the counter. I have introduced a bill that would put vaccination status as a protected class, so you cannot be discriminated against for that. But ultimately, you have to find out what you think could get passed in your state legislature. But I have to say this, Jesse, you mentioned, picking up the phone and calling them or emailing them. The best way to put pressure on your state legislators is through social media. I hate social media. I know that they hate us conservatives, that they're trying to censor us nonstop. But if you send an email or make a phone call to your state legislator, they can delete the email, they can delete the voicemail. But if you go and you post on their social media to where their family, their friends, people they go to church with, their other coworkers, other people see people posting and asking the question, hey, why aren't you standing up for our rights? Why aren't you opposing these mask mandates that haven't worked, that are unconstitutional? Then it actually does exert more pressure on them, because it embarrasses them. Because then they actually have to publicly stand account for it, rather than privately being able to email you back or ignore your phone calls or whatever the case might be. So that is the best way to actually do something. It's even better than going in person and talking with your legislator, because you can exert pressure by embarrassing them, because most politicians only respond to either pain or pleasure. And if they're not going to do what's right because it's the right thing, we have to exert some pain. And the best way to do that is to publicly expose them on social media.
Hey, thanks so much for watching The First on YouTube. If you liked what you saw, go ahead and like and subscribe. You heard me. Like it, subscribe. You'll get a lot more of it and a lot more of me.